Virtual grand opening of the historic Belmar Park. Thank you, Mr. Nat Travis, for that great kickoff. And for those of you who don't know, Nat Travis was the first African-American mayor in Santa Monica. And for that reason, it is an honor to be introduced by him. My name is Ashley London, and I am the executive assistant for the Santa Monica Black Lives Association. Welcome to my room. I'm burning some sage and some Palo Santos, so I'm ready. But in all seriousness, we are delighted to be with you here today to celebrate the opening of Santa Monica's newest park and its multi-purpose sports field, and to commemorate the African-American history of this site, the former Belmar neighborhood that was displaced through eminent domain in the 1950s. This new park reflects years of community engagement and activism from those who wanted to see additional field space in Santa Monica, and from Santa Monicans who have been eager to acknowledge the history of this site. Today, we are excited to unveil the sports field and the historic exhibition and monumental public artwork that encircles it. We hope you will visit this new public space in person soon. We begin today's program with a Tongva welcome by Julia Bogany and an interfaith blessing for the site, followed by remarks from the Santa Monica Mayor, Sue Hemmerich, and Mayor Pro Tem, Kristen McCowan.
Hello, I'm Julia Bogany. I'm Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel, and I'm here to welcome you to the opening of Belmont Park. I would like to thank the City of Santa Monica for acknowledging the Tongva here and for the people that this park is going to empower. Thank you.
On today, we bless this Belmar Park as a sacred space that represents struggle, but yet a spirit to continue to strive. It represents a culture stricken, but one that survives. It represents a people of African American culture displaced, but not erased. We pray the Lord's blessings upon those who walk the ground as they observe and learn the ambitions of our African American ancestors to participate in the Commonwealth and offer productive resources to this community. May the spirit of the ancestors be recognized, remembered, retrieved, retained, and utilized to unite and be included as a part of this diverse community in which we live. This is our prayer. Amen.
I think to remember is one of the purposes we are gathered here today. Yes, to dedicate a beautiful new park which will be enjoyed by Santa Monica residents and visitors of all ages and all races and nationalities for many, many years to come. But also to remember the once thriving African American community which stood all around us until it was burned down in the 1950s to create space for the Santa Monica Civic Center. Sadly, this was not an uncommon event in poor, often African American and Latino communities across the USA for far too many years. So many neighborhoods were destroyed for so-called improvements like highways and public buildings, just because it was easier to take their homes and businesses than to take even nearby homes and businesses of white people. So we must remember and work to make sure history does not ever repeat itself. Today we ask God's blessing upon this park, the civic leaders who created it, the artists and scholars who researched and designed both the park and the artistic remembrances of its important historical past, the workers who built it, and especially the descendants of those who lived and worked and worshiped here. May their memory help us to recommit ourselves to a city, a nation, a world in which racism and white supremacy no longer exist. God bless you all. Remember.
The oldest blessing among the Jewish people is what we call the priestly blessing. The words of that blessing are, may the oneness that was and is and will be a sheltering watch for you. May the oneness that was and is and will be a kind light for you. May the oneness that was and is and will be feel like a gentle gaze upon you and bring you wholeness out of your incompleteness and inner and outer peace. It felt like the entire priestly blessing reached fulfillment in the Black community of Belmar for a time. And then, through the scourge of eminent domain, the blessing was torn asunder. Today we commit ourselves via memory and the joy this park and field will bring, to return as much of the blessing as we can. By our gathering together, we promise the blessing of a legal and social watch over the rights of the Black community. Through the dedication of this space, we pledge the blessing of light over darkness. In acts of love and respect, we will lift our faces to one another so that Black lives finally matter the way that all lives are supposed to matter. And outer and inner wholeness and peace embrace the memory of those who once lived here.
We applaud the actions of our residents and our city officials in Santa Monica for acknowledging our mistakes of the past and for striving to make amends. We entreat the blessings of the Lord for the historic Belmar Park and of course for our African American friends and anyone like them who have suffered grave injustice. On this occasion, we open our arms with immense affection, embracing everyone and expressing our loving respect for people of all races, all nations, and all religions. We hope and pray that the descendants of those African Americans or native and ethnic population who may have been forced to leave Santa Monica unjustly will seriously consider returning to our city to add to its beauty, its vitality, and greatness in the days to come. God bless you all.
We offer God's blessing on all who enter these gates. The rules first say, play hard and respect one another. And so as we play hard, we respect all people, all races, all colors, all creeds. We respect and pay honor to African American families in this beautiful city who have continued to strive to do what is right. We pray God's blessing on every individual, every heart, every family, every ball that is kicked and thrown and tossed. We do that with respect, with love, with passion, and with courage. And so today, it is an absolute pleasure to offer blessing on this space. In the name of God our Father, amen and amen.
After decades of passionate and tireless advocacy for members of our community, I'm thrilled to welcome you to the grand opening of historic Belmar Park. In 2015, as part of the adopted budget, the City Council set aside reserves to implement what was then referred to as the Civic Center multi-purpose sports field. And city staff prioritized its realization by working closely with key community members and securing all required approvals.
It is through the leadership and tireless efforts of community members such as Marianne LaGuardia, Ann Hoover, and Jolly Mir Hashemi that we are with you today to celebrate this moment. I also want to acknowledge Rick Cole, who was the city manager when the project was approved by the Coastal Commission and broke ground. This field will provide much needed field space for our youth and residents and will improve the well-being of our communities. I'm personally very excited to bring my children to this new field space in the future.
During its approval of the field, the Coastal Commission added a condition that the city acknowledge the site's history as an African American neighborhood as part of its environmental justice policy. The commission condition was included due to advocacy efforts of Dr. Allison Rose Jefferson, a historian who focuses on the African American histories of Southern California. Following the coastal action, city staff conceived the Belmar History and Art as a community engagement project that would infuse history and the arts to uplift, educate, and shine a light on this part of Santa Monica's history. This project commemorates a dark period of our city's past when city officials seized properties to eminent domain to develop the Civic Auditorium campus, displacing a thriving Black community. As Santa Monica and the nation begin the process of reckoning with our history of systemic racism, Belmar History and Art is a launching point for community conversations about this past and how we might learn, grow, and begin to heal these wounds.
Historic Belmar Park will be a fun and active space for youth for years to come, while the monumental sculpture by project artist April Banks and historic interpretive panels by project historian Dr. Jefferson provide a place for reflection, celebration, and learning. The project even includes a history curriculum that will be implemented at Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District in coming years. In preparing for today's celebration, Kathleen Benjamin, one of the dedicated community advisors on the Belmar History and Art Project, shared, and I quote, "We took community engagement to a whole other place," end quote. The community dialogue that underpinned this project, both for the sports field and the recognition of the Belmar neighborhood, is uniquely Santa Monica and reflects the best of who we are. Thank you to the community advocates and advisors and the city staff team who helped make this special place a true community asset and a reality.
Thank you so much, Mayor Himmelrich and Mayor Pro Tem McCowan. We're so glad you can join us today and for sharing your support and your thoughts. Next up, we will hear from a number of our field and sports advocates, starting with one of the field advocates who played an integral role in the creation of this field, the Vice Chair of the Recreations and Parks Commission, Marianne LaGuardia. After Marianne, you'll get to hear from a number of coaches who will share with you what this new field will mean to them and to the youth that they work with.
Welcome. A new park in Santa Monica is a big deal. This new park is an even bigger deal. It's the result of more than 2 decades of community advocacy. We fought all kinds of delays and obstacles, including financial issues, changing priorities of city council and staff, commercial interest in developing this property. We held on to this piece of valuable public property for public use. It's a tribute to community advocacy that we are here today. Our heroes are the parents, kids, coaches, local sports organizations, PTSA members, general community members, marching bands, students, teachers, and most of all, the steel-willed volunteers who brought us to this point. We showed up whenever and wherever we thought it was important to let people know we're not going to let this field go. Santa Monicans on a mission really rock. It was worth it. Eventually, field advocates, city council members, and staff got together to design and implement this incredible asset. Look at this beautiful multi-purpose sports field. Whenever you think about the Santa Monica community, you can think about all the hundreds of people, perhaps thousands of people, who were involved in bringing this one asset to fruition. Thousands of children and adults will be able to enjoy the field for active recreation, youth and adult sports, and cultural events. Nobody knew our last hurdle would be a pandemic that prevented us from opening when and as we wanted. However, what we learned is how crucial and critical public recreation spaces are, health and welfare of our community. Tomorrow, we begin COVID-compliant use of the field. Eventually, thousands of children and adults will use this field each year for soccer, rugby, lacrosse, ultimate frisbee, high school sports, and more. The sports community is pleased to share this park with a historic Belmar community commemoration. We appreciate the learning opportunity it provides to our residents and visitors and the fact that it makes this site so special. Enjoy the park, enjoy the field. You earned it.
Next year, we'll be celebrating our 50th year since the club's founding in 1972. And like AYSO and lacrosse, we've been scrapping for field space from the very beginning. The addition of Belmar Park means a lot for a broad cross-section of our community. Belmont Park creates a domino effect of increased field availability throughout Santa Monica for all sports and for all ages. Belmar Park provides additional after-school field space for the high school teams next door, which in turn frees up after-school field space for the middle and elementary school programs like Crest and the Boys and Girls Club. Belmar is only the second city field to be full-size for soccer, lacrosse, and rugby, which means more senior side games can be played. Our athletes will be playing at a higher level, and Santa Monica can host more tournaments, playoff games, and championships. Belmar serves a growing Santa Monica neighborhood that has long lacked access to field space with nearby public transit. Sport brings us together, and Belmar is a reminder that our diverse community will always need green fields and open spaces where we can gather together for common goals and shared experiences.
When someone comes to Academy of Lacrosse to learn lacrosse, not only do we teach them the sport, we teach them how to be a better athlete. We teach them about how to take care of their body. We teach them about mindset. We also teach them about how to be a teammate, how to deal with adversity. A lot of those things transfer over into real life. You know, we've also heard a lot of parents tell us, hey, my kid has better work habits in school because she's a harder worker because of the fact that she's in a sport now. So we've seen real life benefits to having a field available to kids that transcend just the sport. And to be quite honest, in the last 3 years, we've had close to 30 athletes go to Division I or Division III or Division II for that matter, schools on full scholarships or half scholarships, none of which would be possible if we didn't have the field to provide as a resource to get these kids into the sport in the first place and get them going.
For the youth that we work with, our primary battle here is really finding more field space for them to get out onto the field and practice the appropriate amount of times they need in a week so that they can progress with the sport. I think it's, in soccer we talk about touches on the ball. Other sports it's the same way. In order for a kid to progress in a sport, they need to be practicing at least minimum 2 to 3 times a week in order to progress with that sport. And what the Belmar Park is going to offer to us out here is a lot more field space for our youth to get out. The other thing is the amount of youth that we're allowed to even take in to our organization has been somewhat limited due to the amount of field space that we can provide them during a given season. Now with all this extra field space that we have here, we can finally grow to what the community size is and really give back to our community.
And one of the great things about this field opening up is that it provides a state-of-the-art, modern facility for our kids and our parents to participate on. I think one of the key things that we know is that we want kids in a healthy, active lifestyle, and this will allow them to play more often and get more kids out here, which is the key thing that we want.
Thank you to Commissioner LaGuardia, field advocates, and the coaches for all your work to make this field a reality and for sharing how this new sports field will contribute to the well-being of our communities. Now, we'll be moving on to another exciting aspect of this park opening, the Belmar History and Art Project, which highlights the history of this site, a once thriving African-American neighborhood in Santa Monica. This project was commissioned through the City of Santa Monica's Percent for Art program and made possible for Santa Monica Cultural Affairs and the City of Santa Monica's Public Works Department. In addition to the exhibition at this site, the project also includes educational components such as curriculum, additional historical research, and virtual education elements. A community advisory committee made up of Robbie Jones, Kathleen Benjamin, and Janine Jackson was formed, and they worked with the Cultural Affairs staff, project historian, Dr. Allison Rose Jefferson, and project artist April Banks to guide the Belmar project. First up, Ms. Jones and Dr. Jefferson on the history that this project reflects.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge this history. It's important because then there is accountability for the trauma that happened on the site. Not only the trauma to the families that lived here, but their descendants. And so I think that it's important to bring that to light and to help us with our legacy that we're leaving as a country, as a state, as a city. When I think about my ancestors, I think about my 93-year-old grandmother, and I think that she would be very proud that this is being commemorated and that the city is acknowledging this history where she had friends that lived on this property And I think that it's just very, very important. She would be excited that the youth are having a chance to learn this history.
As you're walking around historic Belmar Park, there's several different types of panels to look at. They all talk about the stories of people, places, and events that happened to different African Americans who were living in the South Santa Monica neighborhoods near the beach. These are the stories that have been erased from the public memory of Santa Monica, and they tell us a lot about why Santa Monica is the city that it is today. The American identity is much more complex than they might think. And the stories that are here in the panels in the park help to make that story richer and more complex, and it adds more dimensions to who belongs in the American identity.
Thank you, Robbie and Allison. You are both so right. We need to acknowledge and embrace our history. And I think this is a great step towards that mission. Next, I am very honored to welcome lifelong Santa Monica resident, Harriet McCauley.
Good afternoon. And thank you, Ashley, and thank you everyone else who's instrumental in having this happen today, but also just in our history. The information everyone is sharing needs to be acknowledged for residents, past, present, and future, and also visitors. Because most people who come to Santa Monica never really realized there was a thriving African-American community here. I have a friend that I met as an adult who used to visit POP and the Pier all the time. She's African-American, lifelong Los Angeles resident. When we met, she asked me where I lived. And I said, Santa Monica. She said, I didn't know Black people lived in Santa Monica. I said, are you kidding? Then I realized how much of our history has been hidden, purposely or not. It doesn't matter. It wasn't, people were not aware of that we lived here. We were professionals, we were doctors, we were architects. In fact, one of the architects, who was an African-American gentleman, one of the Brunsons, was the architect for the city hall. I mean, it goes on and on. We were carpenters, we owned maintenance companies, we owned salons. But we did it not to make an announcement to the world, it's just because that's the way we were living at the time. And then with the Belmar incident and things that happened, there were covenants developed and we were sequestered within a certain area. The furthest south was Pico, north was Colorado and Broadway, east was Centinela, and west, as you know, is Ocean Park. So most of us lived here with other ethnic groups because that's, if you want to know, that's the way we were seen, that we needed to be within a certain area. And there are probably other reasons as well. It's so important for us to recognize this for our children and our children's children. And like I said, visitors, anybody who is related to anyone who's ever lived here and those who are gone, they need to be acknowledged. One of the big instrumental parts of our lives have been our churches. Our churches are the ones that have kept our histories alive. I learned about African-American history through the First AME Church. I did not learn it in school. It was not taught in school. So kids really didn't know what their history was here. We had the African-American Church, we had the Baptist Church, we had the CME Church, we had the Holiness Church, we had the Catholic Church, and we used to all meet at least once or twice a year at gatherings, and we all knew each other. My mother was AME, my dad was Baptist. Could have been CME, it didn't matter. But the churches are what kept us alive. And I think it's important for us to understand how important that is. The churches, one of the big ones, University, Wilberforce University in Ohio, was where one of my aunts went to school. She was going to be the first Black teacher here in Santa Monica in 1940. Unfortunately, there was an accident that she died as a result of it. But she also encouraged all of us to go to college, get our education, and spread the news that we existed and that we are here. So I'm really pleased and happy to have been able to be a part of this today. I bless Robbie Jones, her heart, her ability to just gather people together, because she's one of the ones that encouraged me to speak here. And I'm so proud of all of you. And Madison, I'm proud of you. I just think this is wonderful I went to school all the way from McKinley, all the way up to Santa Monica College. I traveled abroad. I was in the military, but I always came home because I thought it was important to maintain our history here. And I appreciate you all for asking me and for allowing me to speak. And I thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. I honestly think that you with Nat Travis are some of my favorite storytellers. So I really enjoy hearing you tell all your stories. Thank you. Next up, I am honored to introduce Natalie Patterson, who will be reading a poem that was inspired by a Belmar History and Art Community workshop that she led. Natalie's poem will be followed by remarks by Belmar Community Advisor, Kathleen Benjamin.
The Wonder, the Answer in 4 parts. 1. I wonder what it would be like to lay in front of Ebony Beach Club, to know this city as my own, to have a place created specifically for me. I wonder what brunch would taste like out of the watchful eye of racial expectations. I wonder what stories shared, not uncovered, pride's like. What must it have felt like to have purchased land with the intention of future generations being able to live freely, I wonder. Who decided folks that look like me were unworthy? Might it have been the same folks or ideas, or folks holding outdated ideas? I wonder if not knowing their names and faces helps hide the treachery. I wonder if art projects and half-hearted reconciliation make up for the land and liberties lost. I wonder about the families of Belmar. I wonder if in 50 or 100 years, some girl will have to write a poem, the same version of this poem about Baldwin Hills or Inglewood or Koreatown. I wonder if Biddy Mason, Jefferson Edmonds, Pio Pico, and James and Mary Stout could have envisioned how quickly their progress would turn erasure. How is it that I'm just learning these names, these stories? How is it that still so many don't know? This city of bright lights and luxury painted over a history of stolen everything too. A history erased leaves questions for future generations. But I was born on solid ground, born free, but these lies be loud. Sounds like freeways carved through Black neighborhoods. Sounds like trains barreling through. Sounds like redlining. Sounds like higher interest rates on homes and auto loans along racial lines. Sounds like debt we can't pay back. Sounds like we ain't all playing by the same rules. Who made this playbook? Who decided to tear us down then and now? Nothing changes until we do. 3. I pray this city built before the sea be swallowed whole, be reset completely. They seem incapable of equity every night. Human beings sleep on streets and we step over them, sweep them onto new side streets, incarcerate them, do anything except help them for Black people, people originating from the continent of Africa. Every space you sit or step in is yours. Our ancestors built too much of this to ask permission to exist. As often as we do, look around. All of this is yours. Feast on the fruits of your ancestors' labor. Listen closely and you can hear their guidance in the trees, in the tide, in the sunset. Beloved, you have always been the answer.
Santa Monica can look beyond the field and begin to capture, acknowledge, and embrace the history that was erased. We have an opportunity to learn from our history as we move forward to heal and build. I think what this project means in the present moment is we're being acknowledged for our past as we move forward into the future, and it's definitely a learning process. We get to embrace our history as we begin to stand taller in who we are, and the African Americans that visit and that already live here can be strengthened and empowered by this history.
And now, please enjoy the unveiling of the park's public artwork, A Resurrection in 4 Stanzas, by artist April Banks.
Hi, welcome to the unveiling of A Resurrection in 4 Stanzas This sculpture is the culmination of a year and a half of work with community. I'm super excited that this project can be a marker for all the history that we've learned and for all the stories that the community has told us. So the first of the 4 pieces of sculpture is this porch. And the porch was really important to include because it is the space where families gather. It's a space where you can talk to your neighbors, you're watching the street and life go by. And so it just represents this communal space. It was important to include some of the original architectural details like the corbel here and be true to some of the architectural details like the railing. Obviously this is not the full porch, this is built to architectural scale, but the point was not to recreate the whole house, but to create these thresholds. One of the big themes that I wanted to focus on for the project was movement. So we're talking about migration of the African Americans that came to this community, but also the forced displacement through eminent domain. And so this idea of movement and threshold was a theme that I really wanted to focus on. And so the shadows are an important part for that reason because the shadows are always changing, they're always moving, so even though this is a steel sculpture, it gives it a sense of movement. And in the roof, we have a quote from Maya Angelou about home, because I think the idea of home is important when you're talking about displacement. It goes beyond house. The next piece of sculpture is the doorway, another threshold. It's the final threshold between inside and outside and represents security. And at the base of that, we have buried a time capsule. And the time capsule is a collection of letters and photos from community as well as pieces from the project and general wishes for the year 2070 when this will be unearthed. It also includes work from students that we did in workshops at schools here in Santa Monica, and I feel like it's a really significant part of the project. So if we go through the door, the pattern here is meant to be a record of how these houses were destroyed. So we know that after eminent domain, instead of a typical demolition, these houses were burned, and it feels something like a spectacle. And so I wanted to record that in some way into the house. So we have a flame pattern here at the bottom, and then kind of the crackle or breaking of glass. The next piece is a representation of the house. Again, just a sliver of it, meant to be a threshold. The pattern is really important, so I wanted to kind of celebrate this idea of home and the lives that were lived and the hopes that people had. And so it's just a reflection meant to like give life, make us think about the people who lived here. There are 2 patterns of photos cut in the side. The visibility of them all depends on the time of day and how the light and shadow is falling. In the roof is a bit of prose that I wrote to reflect on domestic life, a celebration of the dreams that people had, and just enjoying family time together. So it's just meant to be a reminder of what was lost beyond property, but this sense of community. And the 4th piece is the window, meant to be a representation of the future, of reflection, contemplation, and dreaming. As an overall concept, I felt it was important not to create an object on a pedestal, but a space that people could walk through and move through and inhabit. I hope that the space is used for classes, for performances, for poetry readings, and it really becomes an active stage in a way. At the end of the sculpture is the artist label, and it was really important to go beyond a typical artist label that just lists the information about the materials, because there is so much history included in this project and in the sculpture itself. And this gives you a little bit of information about those historical elements. And then there's information on how you can learn more on the website for Belmar History and Art at the City of Santa Monica.
Thank you, April, for creating and contributing such great art to our city. Next up, we'll hear from Belmar Community Advisor and Arts Commissioner, Janine Jackson, followed by the SMM-USD Black Student Union President, Madison Camplane.
I think that this project conveys hope and remembrance and resilience. It is my hope that this project is a reminder of what happened over 50 years ago, and that the youth will see and remember to not allow this to ever happen again. My hope for the future of the Black community in Santa Monica is that we will continue to look over everyday challenges and set strategic goals for the future. It is imperative that we stay connected not only to ourselves, but to our community, to our city, and to create allies so that we all can learn and live in harmony.
Hi everyone, my name is Madison Camplane. I'm currently the president of Samo High Black Student Union. I'm a senior and I've been a part of the Black Student Union for 4 years now, holding a position on the executive board for 2 consecutive years. I was secretary my junior year and now I'm president. I've been a student of SMUSD for about 13 years. I started kindergarten at Grant Elementary, then I went to John Adams, and then now I'm here at Samo High, right across the street from what is now Belmar Park. Hearing about the history of Belmar Park from Ms. Okuyama, and after doing a bit of research on my own, was honestly infatuating to me, as I knew very little prior to the park being built. I was able to truly understand what the park was made to commemorate in the city of Santa Monica. To know that African American residents and business owners are being represented through this project makes me very proud and puts a smile on my face. I think it's great that BHNA was founded upon 3 co-equal elements: art, community, and history. My feelings about Belmar Park being here as a resource for fellow students is amazing to me, because not only has our field been very crowded due to the number of sports teams who are required to use the field to practice, but now there's an entirely new field right across the street that students may use and learn history within. I hope that the future of Santa Monica, as it relates to its Black agenda to advance equity and inclusion, has leaders of the city's Black community and just the Santa Monica community in general continuing to represent movements such as Black Lives Matter to call for an end to systematic racism that the Black community still continues to face in 2021.
Thank you, Janine and Madison. Madison, keep going, girl. You are making us all so proud and give us so much hope for the future. Speaking of the future, one element of the artwork is a time capsule that was recently buried at the site. Please welcome City Manager Lane Dilg to introduce the Belmar time capsule.
Belmar History Plus Arts project over the past year and a half has offered members of our community opportunities to uplift and to honor this part of our community's history. Participants in the project and those with historic ties to this land have been invited to participate in a time capsule to share memories of the past, reflections on where we are today, and their hopes for the future. The time capsule will be opened on Juneteenth, 2070.
Hello, my name is Justin Best. I'm a recent graduate of Santa Monica High School and an artist with 2 pieces in the Belmar time capsule. The capsule burial was such an exciting event, and I think it was so interesting to envision what the future of Santa Monica might look like when the capsule is open. I and some other students worked on a zine in which we depicted what we thought this future might look like through drawings, paintings, and writings, as well as the past of this thriving community. And I think it's so important to celebrate this past as well as looking to the future and thinking about what could be. When the capsule is open, I will be almost 70 years old, and I think that looking at all the writings and the art from the past will be such a powerful and touching experience.
A time capsule of Santa Monica's African American history was buried February 22, 2021. For those who came before and those yet to come, welcome to this community record. This time capsule was buried at the door of a resurrection in 4 stanzas as we contribute memories, historical records, hopes, and dreams. If I'm still alive when this time capsule is unearthed, I'll be 97 years old. This memory vault was an important part of my proposal for Belmar History and Art. It creates a symbolic and literal space for personal and community stories to be preserved. It provides a space for celebration and reflection. I chose the unearthing date of June 19th or Juneteenth because it is Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, or Liberation Day, the day of the official end of legalized slavery in the United States. The year 2070 was selected by students who wanted to imagine their art 50 years in the future. My hope is that the social and political climate of the city, this nation, and the world will have evolved so entirely that these current circumstances will be hard to fathom. By the year 2070, the students from Santa Monica High and Crossroads School for Arts and Sciences who engaged in workshops for this project will be our elders. I hope that they will be more informed citizens, compassionate leaders, and protectors of the environment. I hope that they will see the love, life, and contributions of their ancestors and community archived here. I hope that this will inspire and remind them to never forget this history and that we imagined a better future for them. That they will look back on their art and letters entered here as youth and be reminded that they too contributed to this imagining of a better tomorrow.
What an amazing element of this project. It's powerful to think about people writing a letter to the future from our current time, especially considering the year that we have all just been through. Where is the sage? It speaks to the timeliness of this commemoration and how we can move forward to healing, reconciliation, and justice in the future. The city will continue this work, and we encourage you to stay involved. We look forward to welcoming you to the field, which will support the development of Santa Monica's youth for generations to come. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to all who participated in making this significant achievement possible. Farewell and good evening.